Out of 243 species, only 3 ever survived the Gauntlet Protocol. This is the case study of the one species that didn't survive it. They rewrote it. Look, I have been doing this job for 17 cycles now, and I have seen exactly 243 species attempt the Gauntlet Protocol. You know how many passed on their first attempt? 3. 3 species out of 243. So when the humans submitted their application to join the Galactic Collective, I laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, in front of my supervisor. Got written up for it too, which, honestly, fair enough. The thing about the Gauntlet Protocol is that it does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your cultural achievements, your technological advancement, or how many pretty speeches your diplomats can make. The protocol strips everything down to one simple question. Can your species survive when everything goes wrong? And I mean everything. My name is Kelsor Thrain, and I am a certified observer for the Collective's advancement trials. Fancy title for someone who basically watches species fail spectacularly and then writes very detailed reports about why they failed. It is not a popular job, but someone has to document the disasters. The staging platform hummed beneath my observation pod, a sterile white expanse roughly the size of a small continent. 16 species had been selected for this trial cycle, 16 different evolutionary paths, 16 different survival strategies, 16 different ways to prove they belonged among the stars. The Vrelians brought their crystalline environmental suits. The Korthans brought their pack mentality and brute strength. The Selkath brought their hive mind coordination. The humans brought one girl, one single girl. Her name was Iris Caldwell, age 22 standard years, which apparently counted as barely adult by human standards. She stood approximately 1.7 meters tall, with dark skin, darker hair pulled back in what humans call a ponytail, and the kind of eyes that seemed to be cataloging everything around her with unsettling focus. No special equipment, no obvious physical advantages, no backup team waiting in the wings. Just Iris wearing some kind of gray fabric jumpsuit and boots that had definitely seen better days. I pulled up her file on my datapad, skimming through the details while the trial administrators ran their final checks. Born in a place called Detroit, engineering student, grew up in what humans classified as a low-income area, whatever that meant. Her application essay had been 4 sentences long. 4. The Vrelian delegation had submitted a 300-page thesis on their civilization's worthiness. Iris wrote, "I fix things that are broken. I build things from scraps. I do not quit. Let me show you." The audacity was almost charming. Almost. The other candidates were doing their pre-trial rituals. The Korthans were howling their battle cries which echoed across the platform like dying machinery. The Vrelians were meditating in a circle, their crystals chiming softly. The Ithrine delegates were already arguing amongst themselves because apparently they could not help it even before the trial started. Iris was stretching, touching her toes, rolling her shoulders, cracking her neck, like she was preparing for a light jog instead of a trial that had a 37% fatality rate. The announcement came in all registered languages simultaneously, a booming voice that rattled through the platform's substrate. "Candidates, the Gauntlet Protocol will commence in 60 seconds. Shelter provisions will be removed first. Prepare yourselves." I watched the other species tense up. Some grabbed their prefabricated shelter components tighter. Others huddled closer to their designated survival zones. The gauntlet always started the same way, removing the one thing every species needed: protection from the environment. Iris stopped stretching and smiled. Actually smiled. That should have been my first warning. The countdown hit 0, and every single shelter, tent, environmental bubble, and protective structure vanished. Just gone. Molecular disassembly, instantaneous and absolute. The Vrelians gasped, their crystalline suits suddenly their only defense. The Korthans snarled, already eyeing each other's territories with suspicion. And Iris? She walked calmly toward the nearest pile of broken debris, knelt down, and picked up a shattered panel that looked completely useless. I leaned forward in my observation pod, my secondary eyes focusing on her movements. This was going to be interesting. The panic started exactly 4.3 seconds after the shelters disappeared. The Vrelians were first, naturally. Their lead delegate, a towering crystalline being named Thesix, made this sound that my translator could not quite process. Something between a whale and the noise glass makes when it is about to shatter. His entire crystal structure began vibrating at a frequency that made my observation pod's sensors scream warnings. The other two Vrelians immediately clustered around him, trying to stabilize his molecular cohesion with these desperate, chittering frequencies. "Unacceptable!" the sixth shrieked, his voice cracking across multiple octaves. "The environmental radiation will corrupt our matrices within 20 cycles. We demand immediate restoration of protective equipment." "Yeah, good luck with that. The protocol does not do refunds." The Uthrine delegates went the opposite direction. Instead of collapsing, they started screaming at each other. All 6 of them, simultaneously. Their species communicated through aggressive debate, which was fine in a council chamber, but absolutely useless in a survival situation. Within 30 seconds they had split into 2 factions, each faction absolutely convinced that the other faction's survival strategy would doom them all. I made a note. Uthrine delegates have forgotten they are competing against other species, not each other. Estimated survival time 6 hours. The Corthans, bless their brutally simple hearts, did exactly what I expected. All 12 of them fanned out across their designated zone and immediately started trying to claim more territory. Their species operated on pack hierarchy and resource domination. Shelter gone. Fine. They would just take someone else's space. Their pack leader, a scarred beast named Grothak, was already bellowing challenges at the neighboring Selketh delegation. "This ground is ours," Grothak roared, slamming his massive fists against the platform. The impact sent vibrations through the observation pod. "Surrender your zone or face the consequences." The Selketh, operating as their typical hive mind, simply formed a defensive perimeter and ignored him. Smart. The Corthans would tire themselves out eventually. Meanwhile, the Helixian candidate had already started crying. Actual tears, streaming down all 4 of its eye stalks. It had curled into a ball in the center of its zone, tentacles wrapped around itself, and was making these pitiful mewling sounds that my translator kept rendering as mother, mother, mother. 17 cycles of doing this job, and that part never gets easier to watch. But here is the thing that made me pause my note-taking and actually zoom my primary observation lens in for a closer look. The human was not panicking. At all. While every other species was either having a breakdown, starting fights, or arguing about philosophy, Iris Caldwell was walking slowly through the debris field with her hands clasped behind her back. Just walking, observing, her head tilted slightly to one side, then the other, like she was mentally cataloging every piece of broken equipment scattered across the platform. The trial administrators had left the debris field deliberately. Broken panels from previous failed shelters, shattered equipment, twisted metal supports that had proven inadequate against the protocol's environmental hazards. It was all junk, useless garbage that previous candidates had abandoned when they realized it could not save them. Iris stopped in front of a panel that had been half melted by acid rain during the previous trial cycle. The thing was warped, corroded, and had holes eaten through it in 3 places. She crouched down, running her fingers along the edges, and I swear I saw her nod, like the broken panel had just told her something useful. "What are you doing?" I muttered to myself. All 4 of my eyes fixed on her. She moved to the next piece. A support beam that had snapped in half during a seismic test. Completely compromised structural integrity. She picked it up, tested its weight, and set it down carefully in a specific spot. Then another panel. This one was intact but made from a Uthrine composite that had failed its heat resistance requirements. She added it to her growing collection. The other candidates were not paying attention to her. They were too busy with their own crises. The Vrelians were still trying to prevent Thesix from having a complete molecular breakdown. The Corthans had started fighting amongst themselves about hierarchy. The Uthrine were now debating whether survival was even philosophically meaningful. But I was watching Iris, and the longer I watched, the more confused I became. She was not scared. She was not angry. She was not even particularly rushed. She looked like someone who had done this before, like someone who had stood in the ruins of something broken and thought, "Okay, what can I make from this?" That confidence was either going to save her or kill her very, very quickly. I started a new note. Human candidate displays unusual calm. Possible shock response? Monitoring for delayed panic reaction. Iris picked up another broken panel, smiled at it like it was an old friend, and added it to her pile. No panic yet. I was starting to think there would not be any. Okay, so here is where things started getting weird. Iris had collected what I can only describe as the absolute worst pieces of debris on the entire platform. I am not exaggerating. I pulled up the material analysis data on every single item she had chosen, and the computer kept flagging them with warnings. Structural integrity compromised. Thermal resistance inadequate. Corrosion damage severe. One panel she picked up was literally classified as hazardous waste from the previous trial, and she just kept adding to her collection like she was shopping for groceries. The Corthan pack noticed her first. Grothak had finally stopped trying to intimidate the Selkith and had turned his attention to easier targets. He stomped over to Iris's zone, his pack members flanking him in what they probably thought was a threatening formation. "Human," he bellowed, loud enough that my audio sensors automatically dampened the input. "You gather garbage while others claim territory. Your weakness will be your end." Iris looked up from examining a twisted metal rod. She did not stand up, did not even stop what she was doing. Just looked at him with those dark eyes and said, in the flattest, most unimpressed tone I have ever heard, "Cool story. You want this bent panel? I am not using it." Grothak blinked. All three of his eyes. I do not think anyone had ever responded to his intimidation tactics with complete disinterest before. "You mock me," he snarled. "Nope." Iris went back to examining her metal rod. "I am just busy. You can have the bent panel if you want. It has got a stress fracture running through the center, so it will snap if you put any weight on it, but hey, your funeral." One of Grothak's pack members actually picked up the panel she had mentioned, examined it, found the stress fracture exactly where she said it would be, dropped it hastily and backed away. Grothak made a noise that my translator rendered as confused anger and stomped back to his pack. I heard him muttering something about strange prey and unnatural calm. The Athrene delegation decided to offer their opinion next, because of course they did. "The human strategy is fundamentally flawed," announced one of them, a philosopher type named Kixnal. "She collects materials with no cohesive architectural plan. Observe how she places items without measuring, without calculating load distribution, without even considering environmental factors." His rival, another Uthrene named Velmar, immediately disagreed. "No, no, no. Her flaw is not the lack of planning. Her flaw is that she plans without understanding the materials. She assumes functionality where none exists. It is epistemologically backwards." They started arguing about which type of wrongness Iris was demonstrating. She ignored them completely. I zoomed in closer, focusing all my visual sensors on what she was actually doing, and that is when I started to see it. The pattern. She was not randomly collecting debris. Every piece she chose had something the others lacked. A panel with holes in it. She set it aside in one pile. Intact panels with heat damage. Different pile. Broken support beams, sorted by size and type of break. Metal rods, composite sheets, crystalline fragments, even some kind of flexible cabling that had snapped during a previous trial. All organized in a way that made absolutely no sense to me, but clearly made perfect sense to her. Then she started building, and I had to recalibrate my sensors 3 times because I could not believe what I was seeing. She took the half-melted panel, the one with holes eaten through it, and laid it flat on the ground, used it as a base. Then she took the broken support beams, the ones that had snapped in half, and wedged them into the platform's seams at angles. Not straight up, angled. Each one braced against the others in this weird triangular configuration that should have collapsed immediately. It did not collapse. She took the Athrene composite panel, the one that had failed heat resistance, and jammed it between 2 of her angled supports. It fit perfectly. The panel's weakness did not matter in that position because it was not bearing weight, it was redirecting force. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I whispered. She was using the material's failures as features. The panel with holes. It allowed airflow and reduced wind resistance. The broken supports? Their angled placement distributed weight across multiple points instead of relying on vertical strength. The heat-damaged panels. She placed them specifically where the trial's thermal stress would hit, because they had already survived worse and would not degrade further. Every single piece of junk she had collected was being used in exactly the way that negated its weakness. The Vrelian named the 6 had finally stabilized enough to notice what was happening. He looked at Iris's growing structure and made that glass-shattering sound again. "Impossible," he cried. "Those materials are incompatible. Different expansion coefficients, different molecular structures, different failure thresholds. The construction will tear itself apart. Iris did not even look up. Yeah, if I was building it your way, sure. But I am not. She grabbed one of the flexible cables and started threading it through the panels, creating these tension points that pulled everything together. The cables were not strong enough to hold weight on their own, but they did not need to be. They just needed to keep the panels from shifting. The panels were not strong enough to stand alone, but they did not need to be. They just needed to redirect force to the supports. The supports were not intact enough to bear vertical loads, but they did not need to be. They just needed to transfer stress horizontally. It was the most aggressively practical thing I had ever seen. No elegance, no beauty, no adherence to any established architectural principles. Just pure, stubborn functionality built from mutual support of broken things. Within 20 minutes she had a framework standing. It looked like it had been assembled by someone having a breakdown. Panels at odd angles, supports going in directions that made no geometric sense, cables crisscrossing like a drunken spider's web, but it was standing. And it was growing. I checked the structural analysis my sensors were feeding me. The numbers made no sense. The framework should not be stable. Every predictive model said it would collapse, but there it was. Standing, solid, getting bigger with every piece she added. I started a new note, then deleted it. Started another one, deleted that too. Finally I just wrote, human candidate has built a functional structure from non-functional materials. Recommend review of fundamental engineering principles. Or possibly review of human psychology. Maybe both. The first 20 minutes of the trial were almost over, and Iris Caldwell had just broken every rule in the structural engineering handbook. The environmental hazard warning came 12 minutes early. 12 minutes early. I checked my chronometer twice, then checked the protocol schedule, then actually called my supervisor to confirm that yes, the trial administrators had just activated the first hazard test ahead of schedule. My supervisor laughed, actually laughed at me, said something about how the candidates this cycle were progressing too comfortably and needed additional motivation. Additional motivation. Right, that is what we are calling potential death now. The warning klaxons started blaring across the platform, and I watched every species react in exactly the way their psychological profiles predicted. The Vrelians panicked. The Corthans roared challenges at the sky. The Athrenes started debating whether the early activation violated the ethical framework of the trial. Iris looked up at the darkening sky, said something that my translator refused to render, but was definitely a human curse word, and started moving faster. The storm came from the north because the protocol loved its dramatic entrances. Black clouds that roiled with chemical reactions, wind speeds that went from 0 to 80 kilometers per hour in under a minute, and temperature drops that would freeze most carbon-based life forms solid. The Selketh hive mind had managed to construct a dome using their combined body mass and some kind of organic secretion. Smart. Efficient. The dome sealed just as the first freezing rain started falling. They would be fine. The Corthans had piled debris into crude walls and were now huddling behind them, using their pack's combined body heat to survive. Brutal but effective. Grothak was already barking orders about rotation schedules so no one froze on the outer edge. The Athrene were still arguing. I checked their vitals. 3 of them were already showing signs of hypothermia. I made a note recommending immediate extraction. If their core temperatures dropped another 2 degrees, the Vrelians were in serious trouble. The 6 had managed to form a crystalline barrier, but it was already cracking under the thermal stress. Ice was forming along the fracture lines. If that barrier shattered, they would be exposed to the full force of the storm, and their molecular structures would destabilize. I gave them maybe 5 minutes before mandatory extraction. And then there was Iris. Her structure looked like it should have been the first thing to collapse. I mean, really looked at it. Mismatched panels held together with scavenged cables, supports angled in ways that violated every stability algorithm I knew, gaps and holes everywhere that should have let the wind tear right through. The first gust hit her framework and I actually braced for the collapse. It did not collapse. The wind blew through the holes in the panels, the one she had deliberately chosen, and instead of building pressure inside the structure, it just passed through. The angled supports flexed, actually flexed, bending with the wind instead of resisting it. The cables went taut, then loose, then taut again, absorbing the rhythmic buffeting like shock absorbers. But here is the thing that made me lean forward so hard I bumped my head on the observation pod's viewport. Iris was not hiding inside her shelter. She was outside in the storm, adding to it. "What are you doing?" I shouted at the screen like she could hear me. "Get inside. The temperature is dropping 15 degrees per minute." She grabbed one of the heat-damaged panels, the ones the Vrelians had mocked her for collecting, and angled it against the wind. The storm's freezing rain hit the panel and started forming ice, but the panel's surface was already so degraded that the ice could not get a smooth grip. It built up in these rough chunks that actually created a better wind barrier than the smooth panel would have. She wedged the panel into place, using the ice itself as mortar. Then she grabbed more panels and started doing the same thing all around her structure, letting the storm's own force build her walls higher, using the ice as reinforcement, turning the hazard into a resource. The Vrelian barrier shattered. The extraction team teleported them out immediately, their crystalline forms already showing molecular corruption. Trial over. Failure logged. 2 of the Ithrine collapsed. Extraction team grabbed them too. The other 4 finally stopped arguing and huddled together for warmth. But I could see their vitals dropping. They had maybe 10 minutes left. The Corthan walls were holding, but barely. Grothak had 3 pack members showing severe frostbite on their extremities. They would survive, but they were losing functionality fast. The Selketh dome was perfect, completely sealed. They were actually maintaining comfortable internal temperatures. The old star for the hive mind. And Iris's structure was growing. Every minute, she added another panel. Every panel was placed specifically to catch the ice, channel the wind, or redirect the rain. She had created these runoff channels using broken support beams that let the freezing water drain away before it could pool and add weight. She had angled the top panels so snow would slide off instead of accumulating. She finally ducked inside her shelter, and I got a glimpse of the interior through my thermal sensors. She had used some of the flexible cabling to create a suspended platform off the ground, keeping herself away from the coldest air that was settling at floor level. She had layered panels to create insulation pockets. She had even positioned one of the metal rods to conduct heat from her own body and radiate it back, creating a tiny warm zone around herself. The temperature outside hit -40 degrees. The wind speeds topped 90 kilometers per hour. Ice was forming on every surface. The Ithrine extraction happened at minute 7. All 4 remaining delegates pulled out. Failure logged. The Corthans lost 2 more pack members to frostbite at minute 12. Extraction. Grothak howled in fury as his pack size dropped to 7. The storm raged for 30 minutes total. When it finally cleared, 3 species remained. The Selketh in their perfect dome. The Corthans reduced but surviving. And Iris Caldwell sitting in her impossible shelter made from garbage, eating something from her rations like she had just weathered a light drizzle instead of a killer storm. I pulled up the structural integrity data from her shelter. My computer flagged it immediately. The structure was now 40% stronger than when the storm started. She had used the hazard to improve her defenses. I stared at the report for a full minute, then started laughing. Could not help it. 17 cycles doing this job, and I had never seen anything like it. The trial administrators were already reviewing the footage. I could see their communication channels lighting up with disbelief. One of them sent me a direct message. "Is the human cheating somehow?" I sent back, "No. She is just better at this than we thought possible." Iris stood up, stretched, and walked outside to examine her shelter from the exterior. Then she started collecting more debris. The trial was only 1/3 complete. The Corthan pack leader approached Iris 45 minutes after the storm cleared. Grothak walked slowly, which for a Corthan meant he was being respectful. Or possibly scared. Hard to tell with their species. His remaining pack members stayed back, nursing their frostbite injuries and watching their leader with wary eyes. I zoomed in, audio sensors at maximum. This was going to be good. "Human," Grothak said, and his voice had lost all that bellowing aggression from earlier. "My pack suffers. 3 lost to the cold. 4 more injured. We are strong, but the next storm will take more of us." Iris was reinforcing one of her wall panels. She did not stop working. "Yeah, that is rough. Sorry about your people." Grothak shifted his weight. "Uncomfortable. Your shelter stands. Grows stronger. This is unexpected. Thanks. I guess." A long pause. Then, and I had to replay this 3 times to make sure I heard it correctly. Grothak said, "May my pack share your protection." The entire observation center went silent. I checked the communication channels. 17 administrators were watching this exact conversation. No one was breathing. Iris finally stopped working and turned to face him. "You want to come into my shelter? The one you called garbage? The one you said showed weakness?" Grothak lowered his head. A submission gesture. "I was wrong. Your strength is different than ours. But it is strength." Iris studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Yeah, okay. But your pack helps with construction. I need more support on the eastern side before the next hazard hits, and I cannot do it alone." Just like that. No gloating, no demands for apology, just practical negotiation. The Corthans moved into her shelter within the hour, and honestly, watching Iris direct 7 massive warriors in construction techniques was probably the highlight of my entire career. She had Grothak holding panels at specific angles while she secured them, had 2 pack members collecting debris based on her exact specifications, had another 3 reinforcing weak points she identified. The shelter doubled in size in 90 minutes. Then the Selkath hive mind sent a drone. A single unit detached from their dome and approached Iris's expanding structure. The drone communicated in rapid clicks that my translator rendered as query. "Your construction method defies standard engineering principles. HiveMind calculates 17% chance of catastrophic failure, yet structure remains. Explanation requested." Iris was teaching a Corthan how to create proper tension with the cables. It is not about the individual pieces being perfect. It is about making them work together. Every broken thing here supports another broken thing. That is how it stays up. The Selkath drone processed this for exactly 4 seconds. Then, proposal. HiveMind offers structural analysis and coordination. Human offers adaptive construction knowledge. Mutual benefit calculated. You want in too? Affirmative. By the time the second hazard warning sounded, Iris had 3 species working together in a shelter that now covered almost a quarter of the platform. The Selkath provided calculations. The Corthans provided labor, and Iris provided something none of them had, the ability to see potential in broken things. I was writing my preliminary report when my supervisor called me directly. Her voice was strained. "Kelsor, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The human is breaking the trial. Not the rules. The entire concept. The gauntlet protocol is designed to test individual species' survival capabilities. She has created a multi-species coalition in less than 3 hours. Our entire evaluation framework does not account for this." I looked at my screens. Iris was explaining to a Selkath drone why a cracked panel was better than an intact one for a specific load-bearing purpose. A Corthan was carefully threading cable under her direction, his massive claws surprisingly gentle with the delicate work. "So what do we do?" I asked. My supervisor was quiet for a long moment. "We watch. We document. And we prepare to completely rewrite our assessment criteria for species advancement." The second hazard hit. Seismic activity. The platform started shaking like it was trying to tear itself apart. I watched the Selkath dome crack and collapse. Watched the few remaining independent candidates get extracted as their crude shelters disintegrated. Iris's shelter flexed and swayed, the broken supports bending with the tremors, the cables absorbing the shockwaves, the mismatched panels shifting but not breaking. When the shaking stopped, her shelter was still standing. Stronger than before, because the seismic stress had settled everything into tighter configurations, and inside 3 different species were working together to prepare for the next hazard. I pulled up Iris's application file again. Read those 4 sentences she had written. "I fix things that are broken. I build things from scraps. I do not quit. Let me show you." She had shown us. All right. The trial administrator channel was chaos. Everyone talking at once, trying to figure out how to score this. How to evaluate a candidate who had fundamentally changed what the trial was testing. I sent a message to my supervisor, recommendation. Stop trying to fit the human into our existing framework. She already built a new one out of the broken pieces of the old one. My supervisor sent back a single word, approved. The trial ended after 6 hours and 42 minutes. Not because the time limit was reached, not because all candidates had failed or succeeded. It ended because the trial administrators looked at what Iris Caldwell had built and realized that throwing more hazards at her would just make her shelter stronger. The final structure covered 60% of the platform. 4 species lived inside it. The Selketh hive mind had contributed their dome's organic material to reinforce the outer walls. The Corthans had used their pack strength to anchor deep support pylons that Iris designed. Even 2 of the Helixian candidates, the ones who had been crying earlier, had joined after the acid rain test. Iris put them on detail work, using their tentacles to thread cables through spaces too small for anyone else. When the extraction beams activated and transported everyone back to the staging station, Iris was still adding panels. She looked annoyed about the interruption. I filed my official report 3 days later. Took that long because I had to rewrite it 7 times. Kept trying to make it sound professional and objective, but honestly, how do you objectively describe watching someone completely demolish 200 years of established testing protocols? Here is what I submitted to the Galactic Council. Official Assessment, Gauntlet Protocol, Cycle 24-4, Human Candidate Iris Caldwell. Result: unprecedented success with significant protocol deviations requiring immediate review. The human candidate did not simply survive the Gauntlet Protocol. She fundamentally altered its nature. Where other species approached the trial as individuals or unified groups of their own kind, the human created a multi-species survival collective within the first 3 hours. Analysis of her methodology reveals several key factors. First, adaptability. The human did not mourn the loss of ideal materials or perfect conditions. She assessed available resources and immediately began using them in ways their original manufacturers never intended. A panel designed to resist heat became a wind barrier. A broken support that failed under vertical stress became an angled brace that distributed horizontal force. Every weakness became a feature in a different context. Second, collaborative instinct. When other species sought her protection, she did not hoard her success or demand submission. She negotiated mutual benefit and immediately integrated their strengths into her construction. The Selketh provided calculations. The Corthans provided labor. The Helixians provided precision work. She provided the vision that made all their contributions matter. Third, and this is the part that concerns me most, she never stopped building. Even when her shelter exceeded all safety requirements, even when survival was guaranteed, she continued improving, continued expanding, continued adapting. The human approach to problem solving appears to have no upper limit. They do not build to the minimum required standard. They build until something stops them. Nothing stopped her. Recommendation: approve human application for Galactic Collective membership with the following notations. Human engineering principles operate on fundamentally different assumptions than collective standard practices. They do not require optimal conditions, perfect materials, or ideal circumstances. They require only that something, anything, exists to work with. This makes them dangerously unpredictable and remarkably difficult to contain or limit. Secondary recommendation: immediate review and revision of Gauntlet Protocol testing parameters. Current trial design assumes species will compete or cooperate within species groups. It does not account for candidates who view all other species as potential allies rather than competitors. Tertiary recommendation: assign permanent observers to human integration process. If one human can restructure a survival trial in 6 hours, we need to understand what an entire species of them will do to our existing frameworks. Personal note from observer Kelsor Thrain. I have spent 17 cycles watching species fail this trial. I have seen the strongest warriors collapse under pressure. I have seen the most brilliant minds calculate themselves into paralysis. I have seen species with technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities give up when conditions became difficult. Iris Caldwell built a functioning multi-species shelter from literal garbage in under 7 hours. She did it while eating ration bars and humming something my translator called a song, but sounded more like organized noise. She did it without panic, without hesitation, without doubt. And when I interviewed her after the trial, I asked her how she knew her shelter would work. How she was so confident using materials that every structural analysis said would fail. She looked at me like I had asked the stupidest question in the galaxy and said, "You grow up with nothing. You learn to make something out of whatever is lying around." Detroit taught me that before I could walk. This trial was just Detroit with better weather and fewer potholes. I checked Earth's files on this place called Detroit. It is not a training facility. It is not a military installation. It is just a city where humans live, where they grow up learning to build functional solutions from broken systems. If that is normal for them, we are not prepared for this species. End report. The Galactic Council approved humanity's application unanimously. First unanimous vote in 40 years. They also created a new trial category called Adaptive Collaborative Survival and put Iris's footage in the training database as the reference standard. I got assigned as the permanent human liaison officer. My supervisor thought it was funny. I think she just wanted someone else to deal with the headaches. I have been working with the human delegation for 3 months now. They sent 50 representatives from Earth. Know what the representatives have in common? Nothing. Different backgrounds, different cultures, different specialties. But they all have that same look Iris had. That look that says, okay, what have we got to work with? Last week, one of them fixed our waste recycling system using parts from a broken food dispenser and something she called a paperclip. The system now runs at 130% efficiency. Our engineers are still trying to figure out how. Yesterday, another one redesigned our council chamber seating to accommodate 17 different species body types using only the existing furniture rearranged in ways that, according to him, just made sense. This morning, I found 3 of them teaching a class on improvisational engineering to a group of Vrelian students. The Vrelians were taking notes like their lives depended on it. I am writing a second report, unofficial, personal observations. The title is Why We Should Have Paid More Attention to the Species That Sent Objects to Space Using Controlled Explosions and Called It Progress. Because here is the thing about humans that none of our assessments predicted, none of our databases warned us about, and none of our careful observers noticed until it was too late. They do not see broken things, they see things that are not finished yet. And now they are here, in the Galactic Collective, looking at all our established systems and protocols and frameworks, with those calculating eyes. I give us 6 months before a human suggests improvements to our faster-than-light drives using something they found in a waste bin. I give us a year before we adopt those improvements because they actually work better. I give us 5 years before we look around and realize humans have quietly rebuilt half our infrastructure using principles we did not know were possible. Iris Caldwell built a shelter from broken panels. But what she really built was a blueprint for how her entire species approaches problems. And we just invited them to apply that blueprint to our entire civilization. The Galactic Council thinks this is a diplomatic triumph. I think we just handed the keys to the galaxy to a species whose first instinct when something breaks is not to replace it, but to figure out how to make it better than it was before. Time will tell who is right. But if I had to bet, I would put my credits on the humans. They have a track record of winning bets nobody thought they could win. Just ask Iris. She is probably already redesigning the gauntlet protocol to make it more efficient. In knowing humans, her version will work better than the original. They always do. This case study shows that survival is rarely about having perfect tools or ideal systems. What matters is whether a system can adapt under pressure or collapse while waiting for better conditions.